So much happens in this comic, right? Absolute Joker, Two-Face looks incredible, the fight with the Robins. So let's get into this. At the outset of this fight, Alfred tried to tell Batman to stand down, right? Do not engage in a public fight. This is as much about perception as it is about reality. But at the end of the day, Batman jumped into it. Now, that's one of the things to remember about Bruce, right? He's headstrong. He kind of convinces himself that he's right, that his way of doing things is the right way of doing things, and he's not necessarily looking at the bigger picture. Now, some of that is just because he's young, right? Because he's youthful, and he doesn't quite have the wisdom to understand how the world works. But some of it is also because of the fact that this is a fight that, from his perspective, needs to be fought, not just to face off against the Robins, but to make sure that the people controlling the Robins know Batman's not gonna back down from a fight. It's sending a message. And so the first thing that happens, Stephanie comes running in and just like hammers this guy and sends him flying into a building. And the funny thing about this is that Dick Grayson, right, who's one of the Robins, R1, says that that hit from Stephanie probably broke every single bone in Batman's body. So once we find him, he's gonna need some serious medical attention. Now, I want you to keep that in the back of your head because it's one of the cool things that we'll circle back around to here in a minute. But what's funny is that Duke Thomas looks at this and is like, nope, he looks pretty healthy to me, because he just comes like flying out of the building and right back into the fight again. And then at that point, Dick Grayson, who's just sitting there in his giant mech suit watching all of this unfold, he asked the question, where did Batman go, right? Does anybody have a visual here? And we end up finding out that what Batman's doing is putting these devices all around Dick Grayson. The whole time, Slade Wilson, operating behind the scenes, watching all of this unfold, tells them, right, trace all signal bands, find out who's in his ear, right? We need to know who's talking to him. And in fact, when that happens, that's when Slade says that he's got a team, Jason, full spectrum barrage, cut off his communication now. Now, that's a huge thing for Batman, right? Keep in mind, Batman is not a tactical fighter in the absolute universe, certainly not the way he is in the main DC universe. Main DC universe, Batman has traveled the world and fought with like the best martial arts teachers in the world, and he's got all this money and crazy detective skills. Bruce Wayne in the absolute universe is a 250-pound civil engineer who honestly kinda sucks at fighting. I'm reversing my statement. Batman in the main DC universe would beat the piss out of absolute Batman. But the fact is, having Alfred in his ear gives him the tactical advantage in these varying fights. But what's cool is that he's learned a lot along the way in these various battles that he's been in over the course of this comic so far. And that's gonna become paramount in this, because what ends up happening is that when Jason Todd fires off the EMPs and the communication is cut, Batman jumps off of Dick Grayson's mech. And then at that point, it's called out. There he is, right? There's Batman right there. Initially, I didn't see him, right? When I was reading this, I was like, what the hell are they talking about, Batman's? Right? I don't see him. Yeah, he's this little tiny guy right there in the middle. It's kind of amazing. But at that point, the Robins are back in pursuit. And Alfred gives us this amazing statement where he says, I yell at him to disengage. Tell him that this is what they're after, the public fight. But the Robins have cut off our communications, so I can only watch the feed as he battles on. This is not the way he normally fights. I have seen soldiers fight like this before though, when it's no longer about the goal, no longer about the mission at all. Because at this point, Bruce is fighting like a man possessed. And that's why I say it's really more about the message than it is about the conflict. But something else that I want you guys to notice as well with the way that Bruce is fighting, he's not fighting offensively. He's not fighting to destroy the Robins. He's fighting to neutralize them. He's fighting in a defensive capacity. And there's no better example of this than when Duke Thomas is chasing him down on his motorcycle and absolute Batman lays out a spike strip. Right? And at that point, Duke rolls over it, the motorcycle explodes, and this guy goes flying. And Alfred continues this monologue, right? When he says that Batman is fighting as if the enemy they're fighting is no longer in front of them, and instead, the one inside their head. So that's kind of the cool thing, right? Again, there's a much bigger picture with Bruce that's going on. The crazy thing is that while Alfred and Harley Quinn, basically Batman's tech guy, to be quite honest, while they're watching all of this unfold, the response of Alfred is, we have to get him out of here, right? This guy is just wildly outmanned and outnumbered. There's no way he can win this fight if it keeps going on, which is true. This is not one of those moments where it's like, and then Batman catches a second wind and somehow comes out on top. No. That's not what happens. The reality is that in this universe or any other in DC Comics, Deathstroke, Slade Wilson, this guy is a master tactician. This guy knows what he's doing. top to bottom. And he's one of the most credible threats in the entire publication history of DC Comics. So when he is here guiding the Robins in their fight against Batman, it's only a matter of time before Bruce loses. And so that's why Deathstroke says, Robins, close in. If his body is still moving, open fire again. And at that point, Dick Grayson chimes back in and says, General Wilson, we just knocked out the electricity for an entire neighborhood and demolished a building. And so at that point, Dick Grayson gets out of his mech, right? And he says, we signed up to protect Gotham City. Does this look like that to you? Because all the other Robins are coming to him, right? Now, here's the beautiful thing about Dick Grayson, and this is how Scott Snyder nails him in this story. In a lot of ways in DC Comics, no matter what universe you're talking about, whether it's the absolute universe here, the way he's being fleshed out, or if you're talking about the main DC universe, Dick Grayson is almost this like Spider-Man meets Captain America type character, which is to say, number one, he's the original sidekick in comic books. Like, he was the first sidekick introduced by DC Comics in the old Batman stories. But within the universe, because he's trained and operated as a Robin alongside Batman, eventually left Force his own way, he's led the Outsiders, he's led the Titans, he led the Justice League for a time, and because he had such strong bonds to various members of the superhero community, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the whole nine yards, he's one of these guys where in a crisis, he always has a level head. And when you're talking about a situation like this, right, a massive battle in a city, even if it is in this reality, the absolute universe where everything is just so screwed up and the bad guys have an edge over the good guys, Dick Grayson is still the guy who's governed by empathy. That when Batman was being attacked, the stance of Dick Grayson, we have to make sure he gets medical attention, even though we are going to arrest him and bring him in, right? In this instance, when you see buildings being demolished and electricity being taken down to the area, Dick Grayson's only concern, how are the people? We need to go and take care of the people. Dick Grayson, in almost any universe in DC Comics, even during that, I think it was the New World story, the one where he took away everybody's powers, it was an amazing story if you never read it. It's phenomenal. Dick Grayson is still a guy who's always thinking about other people outside of himself. And it's so fantastic to see that carried over here in the absolute Batman comic. It's also dope that he's Robin 1, right? Because if he was anything other than Robin 1, I think we'd all be kind of pissed off. But the thing is, right, Dick Grayson comes out and just simply says, I'm going to lay down biometric scanner spikes and make sure that no one was still inside that building when it went down. So again, very much focusing on other people. The crazy thing about this is that Slade Wilson responds to that the way you would expect him to, right? A complete opposite, total lack of empathy, no real concern about how his actions have any impact regarding collateral damage. Because he tells him, right, this is a war. The war that we're fighting, like any war, is going to have collateral damage. People are going to die, and that's just the price that I'm willing to pay. He's Lord Farquaad, right? Some of you may die, but that is a price that I am willing to pay. Well, it's very easy to pay that price when you're not the one being killed. And that's the disconnect between someone like Slade and someone like Dick Grayson. More so than that, though, Slade is hyper-focused on Batman and his perception of Bruce as being a terrorist. Now, lest we forget, Slade Wilson, Absolute Scarecrow, all these guys are basically agents of the Joker, right? And that's the crazy thing about it. The Joker has so much control over everything that's happening within Gotham City. But the fact is, Slade has a singular vision: destroy Batman, kill him, bring his corpse, parade it out in front of the world, and show them no one messes with the authorities in Gotham City. But the funny thing about this is that because there is still Alfred and there's Harley Quinn, it's effectively a rebel force going against the Empire, quote unquote, in Star Wars. And so Harley Quinn ends up dispatching all these like bat drones. And here's a cool thing, right? I do want to talk about this for a second, right? I want to quote this. This is a cool thing. Alfred asked her the question, can you get him? And that's where Harley says, a funny fact about bats, most stay with their colonies for life, but some are wanderers. They'll stay with one colony for a while. They'll form bonds, they'll build families, and then without warning, they will just leave, strike out on their own. The funny thing is, even if they forget the colony does not forget them. They say the colony remembers each call as a group. So even if no bat the Wanderer knew is still alive, the colony can still pick them out of a million other bats just by their call. All of which is to say, yes, we got him. Now, here's the reason why I wanted to quote that here. It's very easy to take that statement as it's being written here and apply it to Batman, right? Oh yeah, of course we can, right? You have all these bat drones and we can just see Batman so we can go and grab him. I don't think that's the case. I don't think this is referencing Batman, right? I mean, look at this. They'll form bonds, they'll build families, and then without warning, they'll just leave, strike out on their own. That statement applies to Dick Grayson, right? Remember in the main DC universe, Dick Grayson was Robin, and then eventually he just took off, did his own thing, and became Nightwing. I think what Scott Snyder is saying here is that Dick Grayson is gonna defect from the Robins, and he's gonna join Batman. I think that's what he's talking about. I think that's what he's referencing here, which I really hope is the case, to be honest with you guys. But the fact is, with all these bat drones out here and the devices that Bruce Wayne put on the mech suit for Dick Grayson, it's all coming together and jamming their sensors. So effectively, it's his escape route. And so that's where the statement's made. Everybody get back to base now. So essentially the Robins are forced to retreat. And in the face of that, the drones grab Batman and they take him away. Now, at this point, we jump to a bit of a flashback, and it may not seem important on the head, but it actually becomes very important with what happens next. Because what ends up going on is we jump back to when Bruce Wayne was working as an enforcer for Carmine Falcone. Because Bruce Wayne had basically cost Falcone a whole bunch of money. And so now he's basically working off his debt as an enforcer, making sure that other people who owe Carmine Falcone money pay up the way they're supposed to, right? Different things like that. And so while they're all just kind of here and talking about Bruce's actions as an enforcer and this pretty baller ass statement where Bruce has a baseball bat and he talks about standing over this guy and says, this bat, it has no soft spot. It's made from oak. It was kind of amazing, right? Jim Gordon ends up pulling up. And the funny thing about this is that Jim Gordon has for quite some time been a father figure for Bruce Wayne, right? Because remember, Bruce Wayne's dad is dead. And while his mom is still very much alive and eventually went on to form a kind of relationship with Gordon, Gordon approaching here and wanting to talk to Bruce Wayne is a very personal conversation because we learn a couple things here. The first one is that Bruce Wayne's friends had actually paid off his debt to Carmine Falcone. Now, Bruce knows this, but the idea and the reason why he stays here is because he's not going to let his friends be in debt to Carmine Falcone on his behalf. But the other thing that we learned that we kind of already knew is that Jim Gordon was in a very bad place at one point in his life, and that the parents of Bruce Wayne had kind of pulled Jim Gordon out of this bad place and got him to a much better place in life. And so in a lot of ways, Jim Gordon sees it as his responsibility to do the same for Bruce. Your parents helped me, now I'm going to help you. And so that's why he doesn't say like, get in the car, let's go, and I'll keep you safe from Falcone. It's really more of just operating as a kind of father figure for Bruce, which is especially apparent considering the fact that Jim Gordon and Bruce's mom do end up finding some measure of love with one another, which Bruce wasn't initially receptive to, but then kind of warmed up to it as time went on. And so that's why he tells him, your mom believes in you, and so do I. And Bruce doesn't reject it. Instead, he's just like, I really, really appreciate everything you're saying. Just trust me, I know what I'm doing. And then he says, and I apologize for what I have to say next, because he has to give the impression that he's not a friend of the cops. So he's just like, you heard me, get out of here, you pig, and don't ever come back. So of course, Jim Gordon just smiles and ultimately drives off. But the reason why this whole exchange matters is because now we switch over to what's happening in the here and now, which is the funeral of Gordon. Because keep in mind, Jim Gordon was forced to jump off of a roof by absolute Scarecrow. And so with Jim Gordon dead, his daughter Barbara stands up and speaks. And it's actually a beautiful moment here. And I want to quote this for you guys because it's beautiful the way that it's done. She says, Jim Gordon was many things to many people. He was a husband, a father, a Marine, a cop, a mayor, and a hero. To summarize him here for you, I don't know how to do that because it's just too much. He was too much. And so I thought about using a memory, but which one? And so she says, was it the day that he taught me to swim by letting me dive for his Medal of Honor? Or the time that he stayed up with me all night to study for my college finals, both of us buzzing on energy drinks until we couldn't think straight? But if I had to boil my dad down to his core to say only one thing about him, I would say thank you for being the one who was always there, the one who never gave up on anyone, not a friend, not an enemy, not a city. He was always there by your side to help you through to the next phase, help you become something better. And she says, I'll miss you, Dad. Your voice, your guiding hand, we all will. If there's any light here, it's that maybe in the absence of your hand, we will reach more often for each other's. Thank you. It's a beautiful eulogy, right? Because that perfectly encapsulates Jim Gordon. Over everything that we've seen in the absolute universe, it perfectly encapsulates him, right? Jim Gordon was the guy that would do everything he could to keep you on the straight and narrow. If he thought you were a person worth saving, he'd give you the shirt off his back. And so following this eulogy, when Barbara Gordon goes to leave, she's met by the Robins, right? Now, here's the thing, man. Jason Todd has no chill, right? And this guy is every bit as much of a dick in this universe as he is in the main DC universe, right? Because Dick Grayson shows up here, right? Just says, my name's Dick Grayson, and on behalf of all of us, we want to apologize, yada, yada, yada. We're sorry for your loss. And Jason Todd's like, and we want you to know that we're going to bring Batman to justice on your father's behalf. Street justice, what he deserves. And it's like, dude, Jason, this is a funeral, man. You don't bring stuff like that to a funeral. This is the celebration of a person's life, and it's people grieving, right? You're really gonna bring that kind of stuff into a house of worship full of the bereaved. What an asshole. Like, this guy is such a dick, and we love him for it. We love that Jason Todd is such a dick. But Dick Grayson turns around, and it's just like, now is not the time for that, man. And Jason's just like, no, now is the time. This is exactly the perfect time. And so Barbara Gordon turns around and looks at them. And number one, she knows who Dick Grayson is, that Dick Grayson's an EMT, literally spent his life tending to the injuries of other people and trying to save lives. And she tells them, right, I saw what you guys did. Your actions demolished a building, took down electricity to a whole other side of that building. And where Stephanie Brown says, well, the building was evacuated, what Barbara Gordon doesn't really say, but you can kind of read between the lines and interpret is, sure, but you didn't make sure it was evacuated before it got demolished. You reacted to the demolishing of the building. And you were just like, well, I mean, let's go make sure that there's nobody in there, right? At the moment, whether people were in there or not, when it was destroyed in your fight with Batman, that never crossed your mind. Recklessness is really kind of what she's talking about here. And so that's why she says, if you guys are gonna go on this campaign and you guys are gonna try to bring in Batman and all this collateral damage is gonna happen, innocent people are gonna be caught in the crossfire, then don't sign my father's name to it. Don't say that you're doing it in his name. Because the reality here is that my father would have championed Batman before we would have championed you. And so at that point, you jump over to Bruce's friends, right? You jump over to Waylon Jones, to Two-Face, to the Riddler, and to the Penguin. Now, there's one major thing that I want to focus on here, and probably the most important thing to focus on here. Two-Face with long hair looks amazing. And I never knew that I needed this. I never knew that I needed to see a Harvey Dent with long hair. The dude looks like Sephiroth. All he's missing is a giant sword. He looks dope, right? It's absolutely amazing. But the funny thing about this is, keep in mind, these guys, their lives were destroyed by Bane. Like, literally, absolute Joker sent Bane into Gotham to not just destroy Batman, but to demoralize this guy. And so once Batman was initially defeated, Bane went after his friends, right? Penguin was like crumpled up like a piece of paper, and pretty much every bone in his body was broken. That when it came to the Riddler, I mean, hell, man, his brain was basically hooked up to a machine by Bane. One half of Harvey Dent's face was burned, and Waylon Jones was actually taken before the whole Bane storyline, or at least at the very beginning of the Bane storyline, and turned into Killer Croc, right? But it's simply just to say, Bruce Wayne starting a war that he couldn't win, but needed to start, right, and needed to do something about, had collateral damage in his friends. And it's all kind of come to this point, because what goes on here is that as they're all talking to one another, you start to realize they're drifting away from each other. Right? Up until this point, this moment right here, and really until the Bane storyline, they were tight-knit. They would do whatever it takes, right? We live together, we die together, right? Like, we do not depart from each other because we are all better than the sum of our parts. But what you end up getting are these kind of statements here and there. For example, Two-Face says, last week, I couldn't stop following this guy. His name was Victor. I'd put him away for life. And now there he was, out and living his best life, all because I'd helped Bruce do the right thing. Victor carved up his victims slowly, kept them alive for days, and started at their feet. I was like his shadow. I just kept thinking about it, how easy it would be, how right it would feel. But then I would tell myself, this isn't you, Harvey, and yet I would want to. Now, two things. Number one, Harvey's referring to Victor Zsasz. And let's be honest, man, Victor Zsasz, right? Look, Joker is dark and twisted in any universe in DC Comics, but I think most people would agree Victor Zsasz is worse. Right, Victor Zsasz is probably more sadistic than the Joker is, going pound for pound with the way he commits his crimes. It's crazy. So I can only imagine what Victor Zsasz would be like in the absolute universe. Nightmare fuel if it ever existed. But the other thing that Harvey's talking about here is, keep in mind, when it came out that Harvey Dent was basically associated with Batman, it called into question every single trial where he had put someone away. And because it seemed like fruit from the poisonous tree, ultimately all these people that had been arrested by Harvey Dent were set free because there was no way to know whether or not their confessions had been coerced or something along those lines. If vigilantism had been the motivating factor behind them being sentenced by Harvey Dent. And it's a personal vendetta, right? Really, Waylon Jones is the only guy who's hanging on here. That for the most part, Penguin says, the guys that we used to be, they're gone, right? That life is over. And he starts going over all the nicknames that they have now, that criminals call Harvey Dent Two-Face, that people refer to Waylon Jones as Killer Croc because of how he looks, and Oswald refers to himself as the Penguin because of what happened to him. But he basically just makes this argument in saying, we all have to fend for ourselves, right? That's just the way that this is. And the response of Waylon Jones is, no, right? We are all greater when we're united. We cannot start splitting up and doing our own thing. The friend group is ending, right? And it's really, really sad to see it go down this way, but there is light at the end of this tunnel. While Penguin does say we have to split off and do our own thing and kind of separate, and it kind of seems like they want to, Waylon Jones is kind of like the light of this group, the one trying to hold them together. And it's entirely possible that might happen, right? It's entirely possible that this group may go on to become what's effectively a superhero group, right? Maybe Doom Patrol of the absolute universe, as opposed to just becoming an outright villain group. Yeah, I don't necessarily know, but I'm hoping that happens. And so what we do is switch over to this segment here with the Joker. And it's the first time that Bruce is actually meeting Jack Grimm. And it's incredible because while he's out here, because keep in mind, he's a civil engineer, right? While he's out here in the middle of this construction site, high above the clouds, he's effectively told by the foreman, hey, we have some investors here. You need to come and meet them. And when he comes out there, Jack Grimm is standing out there, absolute Joker, right? And he says, I'm Jack Grimm, so nice to finally meet you. Now, Bruce knows who Jack Grimm is. He's well aware of who Jack Grimm is, but he doesn't like him. But again, the first time they've met. So Bruce hates him, and Bruce knows enough to know that absolute Joker is the one that's leading the charge here, trying to destroy him. But keep in mind, Bruce doesn't know how deep this goes because he doesn't really even know the story of absolute Joker. None of us do. Right, when we got the origin of Absolute Joker here in this universe, it was done from the perspective of Alfred, and Alfred didn't really know which origin was true, but he had his own theories that Absolute Joker is immortal, right? He's been around since like the late 1800s and been operating, kind of manipulating and controlling things behind the scenes. So when Bruce gets pissed off and goes to attack him, notice this, Joker just sticks his hand in the air and stops Bruce Wayne's fist dead in its tracks, right? I mean, literally, it's like Bruce punching Superman. Right, it's kind of nuts. He just stops him right there and just says, there's no need for that. Let's not make a scene. And Bruce just says, I know what you are. And the Joker tells him, I'm the man who made you. But back then, you were just meant to be a funny side project, a footnote. But I kind of love what you've become. Now remember, he's referencing this bit of information that was given to Bruce that seemingly everything that's happened to him over the course of his life was designed to lead him to become what he is right now. But we don't really know anything besides that. So we don't know if there was some grand plan by Absolute Joker where Batman was supposed to be twisted and sadistic. We don't know if he wanted him to be this way because we don't even know if he's telling him the truth right now, right? That's one of the duplicitous natures of Joker. And so he says, the truth is, I can't imagine life without you anymore. And me, I want to do this dance forever. And that's the obsession, right? That is the obsession of Absolute Joker, because now it's almost kind of like he's in love with Bruce in some way. And Bruce tells him, I am not afraid of you. And the crazy thing is that when Absolute Joker goes to smile, he just says, boo, right? And like shows a portion of what his face actually looks like. Because keep in mind, when he opens his whole face, man, it's like it. Right? I mean, literally, his whole face opens up into just this crazy, wild-looking maw, more or less. And it freaks Bruce out enough that he actually falls off. And the reality here is that if his first encounter with Absolute Joker looks like this, no, right? There's no way he's gonna be able to defeat this guy the way he is right now. Something else is going to have to happen. And so at that point, Absolute Joker goes and catches Bruce before he falls to his death and says, no, right? If you're gonna die, it's not gonna be like this. Right? Not until you see Batman reach his full potential. If you hear one thing I say today, let it be this: Batman is not yours to end. He's mine, and he's just getting started. Now, this shows us this moment with transmutation and plasticity. Now, this is clearly a reference to Absolute Clayface, but if I'm being honest with you guys, I kind of hope it's Absolute Plastic Man. Could you imagine Absolute Plastic Man? Dude, that guy would be cracked. It would be crazy how overpowered Absolute Plastic Man is. The one guy that Superman fears. It would be bonkers. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.